Okay, welcome all. I'll be continuing on with my discussion here, and toxic politics. Yeah, especially in the last several years, we've seen that that's grown to be a real problem for our democracy on both sides. Honestly, it's gotten quite toxic, and I'm a candidate that really wants to work at reaching across the aisle and not demonize the other side to find common sense, common ground solutions that will fit all Californians everywhere. So let's see, with that, I think I want to kind of move on to some Q&A, and I want to let you in the audience, feel free to unmute yourself, I think, and ask a question, and we'll move on from there. And if you're shy, I think some questions were submitted to Nancy in advance, and we can go ahead and address those directly.
It looks like Carolyn has her hand up. And everyone's welcome to raise their own hand as they wish. It's on the bottom under reactions, and it says raise hand. Tim, do you want to take the question from Carolyn?
Yeah, go ahead, Carolyn. I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead and ask.
Great. Thank you so much. I think we all had this enthusiasm several years ago. I'm pretty desperate. I don't know how bad you actually know how bad it is, but anyway, I would love to hear your strategy, what you're suggesting and how you're going to win this.
Okay, so yeah, Carolyn, where are you from, first of all? Where are you?
Oh, Portola Valley,
Portola Valley.
More than
okay.
Almost 30 years, yeah.
And if you could give me more specifics, when you say really bad, specifically, what are you referring to?
Oh, it's very complicated. It's one big network, and we can call it a lawless, bureaucratic, administrative welfare state. And nobody's speaking the truth anymore. It's those who speak the truth, they really get retaliated. It's pretty bad.
Okay.
And we don't get the coverage through the media, and that was the problem.
Okay, so are you referring to, let's say, social media censoring of opinion?
It's all kinds. It's all kinds. But I will submit a whole summary to you to understand. I started becoming involved more locally, hoping to address it, and it's the same thing. You know, you try to help the schools, you try to help healthcare here, you try to help good governance, and they're not even willing. They're so embedded in this network that relies on promoting their policies to get more funding, and nothing gets done. It's all with promises. What we see, for instance, in Portola Valley is we have lost our local control because we have an administration that suddenly started joining the bigger picture, the joint powers. And now they rely on the joint powers that are going to fix all the problems that we have, from traffic, from drought, from things that we all knew are not new news, and we all provided solutions, but they didn't want to do it. And now it's this big mess. And
all right,
how are you going to start solving it?
Yeah.
So I'm interested to know how you're going to get the votes, because you need to get the votes.
Sure. Okay. Well, my strategy, and I think you're speaking to local control, which is something that I'm very much in favor of. I know that there's been a philosophy from Sacramento because of the challenges around housing, for example, where there are top-down policies about the amount of affordable housing and the quantity of housing in various areas all throughout the state that need to be developed, and that it isn't happening for a variety of reasons, to create a more of a top-down structure where housing can be implemented without as much local control and feedback. And I think SB9, I know, has been a poster child for that. That's something that I have looked into. I definitely think that needs to be either revoked or modified so that there is still local control by various cities and townships to what can be developed in their locality. I think that there has been a challenge around the California Environmental Quality Act. And as often happens is policy tends to swing from extremes to extremes where CEQA has been so binding that it's hard to get anything done. Then they put a policy in place where CEQA can be completely worked around, and it frustrates the local people in their not getting their feedback into the problems there. So that's kind of my philosophy around how we're going to move forward on policy. In terms of being able to win the office, which is I think something you're asking about. One of the things I've been doing right now, because I've been reaching out to other candidates like myself that are also moderate, wanting to eliminate the toxic dialogue, I've been helping them a lot up to the primary point, because I should pass through, as a top two, I will pass through pretty much automatically. And I've been helping them forge their candidacy so they can make it through and be in the general election. After the primaries, when I'm going to really start ramping up my campaign, getting the word out, traveling all throughout the region. And just to touch on that a little bit, the region starts in Pacifica, comes down the coast, well beyond Half Moon Bay, inland through to parts of Atherton, Menlo Park, Palo Alto, of course, Woodside, Portola Valley, Saratoga, Campbell, Mountain View, Menlo Park is the area of the new congressional district or Assembly District 23. Just so if you're wondering about that. And I've spent some time going over to Half Moon Bay and Pacifica to start to scout those areas out, because I'm very familiar with that. And I haven't spent as much time as I'd like to up in those areas to find out about what their concerns are. Okay, let's see, there's questions in the chat here, and I will go ahead and pick up this next one here. Okay, Susan, thanks for that question. What are specific ways that fighting climate change that I will advocate for? California under Governor Schwarzenegger was kind of a leader on climate change, and he was the last Republican governor. So I'm also kind of inspired by that. And I think the kinds of policies that I advocated for with the climate work that I've done is a market-based approach. And we have a version of that here in California, which is a carbon pricing mechanism, which addresses the negative externalities of emissions. The preferred way I'd like to see that done is where you put a price on carbon, it goes up steadily. We have a cap and trade system here, which is a carbon pricing mechanism where you create a market, you allocate credits that emitters have to play in. They have to acquire the credits, and they're at a cost that the amount of, I don't want to get too complicated here, but the amount of emissions goes down steadily over time. It's a cap that reduces, so there's fewer emissions. And I would like to see more of the funds that are used to purchase those credits come back to households. My preferred method would be a carbon tax where money is returned back to households from the tax to help offset that transition. And the tax increases over time. Now, that's clearly not a popular thing right now with the way that fuels have gone up in price. And I will speak to that in a minute. But I think the cap and trade system is a good one here. We have a number of ways that money is used. One of them I don't particularly care for. Is using those funds for high-speed rail. I don't think I love high-speed rail. Whenever I'm in Europe, I will use it as much as possible. It's a great mechanism when it's planned out and you have a network of trains that connect each other. But here I felt like it wasn't the most effective way to use the dollars that we were getting from the cap and trade system. I'd love to see those dollars used for things like increasing the number of charging stations or electrifying our mass transportation system, buses and so forth. Or potentially returning more of that money back to households in the form of some kind of dividend. You do get something back right now from PG&E. I think it's bi-yearly. A portion of that money from the cap and trade system is returned back. I think the incentive programs we've had for electric vehicles has been a good way to go. And in general, I like incentive programs for transitioning, let's say, away from gas cooking to induction versus a mandated approach where you're locked out of having any future gas appliances within your home for future builds. I like to see incentive programs versus that kind of approach. So I think that covers a number of things on that question from Susan. Let's see, specific ways. Okay, any ideas about solar energy and electric vehicle rebates? Yeah, so I know that there is a movement going on to change the way that solar and feed-in tariffs are managed for putting solar on your houses. I think solar is a very popular program. I don't think we should make it less appealing and reduce the return on investment when somebody is deciding to go solar. I think large solar installations are probably more effective, but I do think that solar roofs and so forth is a really good way to go. And I know there is a requirement for solar going forward after a certain time here for new builds. I would like to not see solar become more expensive with feed-in tariffs. I understand there's a certain amount of cost that I think should be borne by the person who has got solar installed, but I don't think it should be so burdensome to make it really difficult or uneconomical to go down that path whatsoever. As far as electric vehicle rebates, I think we need to continue that. Obviously, we're in a very unique situation right now because of the challenges of the supply chain. You can get rebates, but you can't get the vehicle at this point. I think vehicles, we're still transitioning into a more affordable market for vehicles, and especially now that everything is going up in price, I think those rebates are even more critical. At the same time, we can see that there's huge demand out there, and so it's almost like you don't need the rebates. But I think rebates are still an important component to keep that that transition to electric vehicles going in a good, sustained manner. Let's see here. I'm looking at Leslie, and what do you see as the state to help mitigate the growing, evolving wildfire risk situation, both here in the state as a whole and here on the peninsula? Yeah, great question on that one. So clearly with climate change, we're having more extreme dynamics in our climate, in our weather. If you saw earlier this I guess late last year, we had a great fall, lots of rain, really a downpour. It looked like it was going to be a fantastic winter. And then pretty much at the beginning of the year, it completely dried out. So as they say, we're seeing wetter wets and drier dries. We've had challenges. We're, of course, in a Mediterranean climate here. We're having we've had challenges with our forest management. We've had years of fire suppression and lax forest management, which has built up an abundance of fuels. And to give some credit to the administration in the past, they have put forward funds to address the fire risks in these very fire-prone areas. And as we've seen, like with the CZU fire, it's coming home to roost. It's not out just in the Sierras and in the north. We're seeing it here too. That the problem is that it's not happening fast enough. We're not getting those clearings of the forest done quickly enough. They created again a separate mechanism for, let me just look that up here real quick, because I know there's some information I wrote down about it. Yeah, California Vegetation and Treatment Program, to get around the lengthy and cumbersome CEQA rules, but it was such a confusing mechanism that they stuck with the CEQA rules, and none of those, that 1.5 billion, none of those projects have been completed. And that's actually mostly out in the Sierra area where they've been looking to focus on that. But we do need to continue to address the fire dangers here in the local area. We've talked about, you've probably heard about defensible space around your homes. And that kind of work needs to be continued, especially here and in the areas that I think a lot of you are from. Los Altos Hills, Portola Valley, Woodside are going to be very prone to that. Let's see. I'm going to check a couple more questions here. Okay, let's see. Looking at the question from David Kane. My question concerns your position on education in general, particularly secondary education on STEM for the underserved. Is the state education policy and funding effective? What would you change? Yeah, STEM education. I know there's been a real focus on that, on education in general. We spend a lot of money and we rank very low in terms of our competencies in elementary education. One of the things I would like to see more of is more choice. And when I say choice, I mean the creation of more charter schools. I think charter schools are a good solution to provide choice. The problem has been, there's been a hold on new charter schools because there has been a challenge around making sure that there isn't that they're up to the same quality as our existing school system. So there's a hold right now as they're looking at the best way to address that, to make sure that the quality is up to snuff. I think through that and through continued focus on STEM, which I think is highly critical, we can really improve our education here in the state. Okay. There are many poor people in this area. How do you expect them to buy an electric vehicle? That's a good point. Yeah, so a lot of people can't afford electric vehicles, and the thing that needs to happen is the volume needs to get high enough that they can bring the price down. The other thing I would like to see is subsidies for resale electric vehicles too, for people, and I'd like to see subsidies for lower incomes, providing somebody who's very wealthy with a $7,500 tax credit is not something they really need. I would like to see those subsidies more available for reliable used electric vehicles so people can purchase them also. Now, the other thing you need is you need to have more charging infrastructure, both at multifamily units and apartment complexes, which we're starting to see, but again, the rollout isn't fast enough. Let's see. Okay. Yeah. Talking about, there's a question about the wildland urban interface, and that's something that is, as people are pushing out or having housing out in the interface with the wildland. You can think about here in the Woodside Portola area, keeping density appropriate down there. Again, I think that's something that can be addressed by good local control and the opportunity to give feedback to your local city councils and town councils, I think is an important thing to make sure that that's done properly. Again, a mandated ministerial approach where there's no real approval process makes it hard to address those kinds of things. Okay, here's a question. These are directly to me, so I will read them because you're probably not seeing them. Feel free to, actually, feel free to, Nancy, I think, why don't you address them directly to Nancy, and then I will have her filter through them and maybe ask me them in case there's a number of questions that seem to be in common from now on. Okay, how can a Republican realistically be elected in the Bay Area since there is no office holders at any level of government? Yeah, that's a good question. And that's the thing that really needs to change. And I think my approach of being a center-right conservative, being able to reach across the aisle. In fact, one of the first things I want to do, and I will actually paste this in the chat for you guys, is I was inspired to see, I'm going to go this to everybody, that there's a California Assembly Problem Solvers Caucus made up of Republicans and Democrats to work across the aisle and get solutions done. That would be my first act once joining the Assembly and getting the office, is to continue to work across there, the aisle. And if there is a supermajority in both the Senate and the Assembly right now, the number of seats is substantial. I think it's 7 on the Assembly side and probably 4 or 5 on the Senate side. So depending on how the election goes, that supermajority may persist. If I were to be able to be in, get elected to office, which I hope, I think I could still influence by joining that caucus and leveraging that group to create changes in policy in Sacramento. Okay. Let's see. Okay, checking that one. Agree with David Kane. Good to hear about engineering and technology background. Thank you. Yeah, check out that Problem Solvers Caucus. Okay, this is from Govind in Cupertino. I'm going to read through it here briefly, and then I will summarize it for everybody. I guess you can all see it here. Small business is physically untenable. It is also making West Valley more unaffordable. restricts ability for cities, challenges building capacity, cities. Govind, if you could unmute yourself and maybe give me a little bit more background on that question.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah. Please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Tim. Actually, we have been a little bit active in Cupertino, and we were expecting that during this redistricting, we might be included in 8023, but it didn't happen anyway. So I was in, I'm in contact with some of the people who are in this forum, and I wanted to give a perspective which we have in, I attend meetings with some West Valley people, and what we have noticed is that not only is there too much of a pressure from from the state in terms of RENA to be able to add affordable housing, which is a good thing. I mean, BMR housing is a good thing, but to build that BMR housing, the builder is going to request that they are able to build market rate and above market, I mean, really luxury kind of housing. The issues are essentially that we don't have an issue with building more housing, but we have to understand the capacity of West Valley cities to be able to accommodate that surge in population. And it is affecting us in two ways. If you notice what has happened over last decade, a couple of decades, West Valley has become more and more unaffordable, not only for the population, but also for the businesses. I mean, businesses are, for all these small local businesses, which are not multinational driven, I mean, based on bigger markets, they are getting really fiscally strained. I mean, some of them are just closing shop. I mean, they're saying, okay, this is not working. For example, I'll give you an idea. We had a branch of Target open in, what they're trying to build as Cupertino downtown. And typically Target does a lot of research before they open a branch. And they opened that branch, and within 2 years, it had to close down. So it looks like things are becoming fiscally very untenable because, we are losing local retail options. People have to drive longer. And also whatever is available, whatever retail or other kind of, things are coming up, they seem to be finding that the cost structure is such that it is becoming a challenging option for them. Nobody has done this analysis. So, whatever I'm saying is mostly from what I'm observing, because, we don't have the bandwidth to do that analysis, but this is definitely noticeable. And, I don't know about other people in, other cities like Woodside or in Portola Valley or other places, but this is something pretty noticeable in Cupertino. And the other thing is that housing, it's everybody knows it's unaffordable. I mean, so building affordable housing would require us to actually, the builder would require either that they get a lot of concessions to build more housing, or somebody has to foot the bill. And I don't think we have that level of funds. And, even if they build, how do we add the capacity, infrastructure capacity for us to handle that surge? That is what is my, in crux, that is what I see as a challenge. If you have any thoughts, we would like to know.
Yeah, so going back to SB 9 and to some extent SB 10, SB 9 doesn't really allow for planning for the infrastructure around things like additional duplex units, ADUs that could all be put on various suburban lots. And my understanding is if it's within a half mile of a major transit hub, they don't even need to provide parking for those units too. That's where the cities shine to help look at the big picture of all the infrastructure that needs to be put in place for ingress and egress, transit, schools, sewer, water, those kinds of things. Of the two, I think SB 10 I like because it is focused on infill, higher density, close to transit hubs. The one issue I do have, if I understand it correctly, is that it can supersede a vote of the people that want to retain, let's say, a open space area. The city council can actually override that. That's not something I necessarily would agree with. But I think the SB 10 approach is a smarter one for higher density, hopefully lower cost type of housing, close to transit hubs, less vehicle traffic because you can use transit. Where I live here, we moved here specifically in a townhome to be close to the San Antonio station. So my wife could commute to work, which she's been doing now for a good 20 years up in San Francisco. So I think there's a real appeal to that. And I think there's a lot of opportunities out there. In fact, I'm seeing that a lot around this area where I'm living, and I'm looking, I'm sure there's going to be that kind of development all up and down the peninsula around that. So yeah, again, local control, local planning, I think is a really important thing. One of the silver linings that may have come about through the pandemic is that tech companies could see that they could operate very successfully without having all of their employees here on site. They can have a distributed employee base. And if I would like to see that continue, so there isn't so much pressure in this area that's loved so much that everybody wants to live here, to have to put everybody here in this one place. And that's going to ease some of the pressure on housing here in the area, I think, and I'd like to see more of that. You know, and there's a question about the RHNA numbers. Yes. To tell you the truth, I'm just starting to follow the whole RHNA process, and I know the next 8-year cycle is getting going. And the regional housing needs allocation process determines how much housing and at what price points need to be implemented in various cities and counties throughout the state of California. I think that, again, that type of top-down, there needs to be more of a back and forth as to what's actually possible in various areas. We can't paint a high-density urban area like San Jose with the same brush you might have in a more WUI type area, wildland urban interface area like Portola Valley, Woodside, even Saratoga to some extent, that when it comes to determining those numbers. Housing is just a very difficult challenge here in the state. And again, I think there needs to be more local control and determination on how that's going to be done.
Can I add something?
Yes, yes, sir.
So I was, our senator is, so we were having a session with our senator, and one of the things which somebody had suggested and which he kind of parroted, I mean, I didn't see any action plan behind it, but essentially, there is a feeling among a lot of people that California can have more than one Silicon Valley. I mean, this Silicon Valley can be replicated probably in 2 or 3 places within the state. And there's no need for us to kind of cram it down here, because this is, of course, a place where we have a lot of hills. We are trying to preserve the what is called a natural, we are trying to make sure that the natural habitat range for, whatever is the natural habitat, that we don't kind of overtake that part. And I would like to suggest that, since I know it's very hard sell point for anybody who is trying to get into the legislature, but I would request that if you can take all our viewpoints. I'm from Cupertino. I'm not in your district, but this is what I have been hearing even from the other West Valley people. Some of them can, if they want to chime in, it will help. Essentially, we need a new thinking. The current thinking, cram it everything here. on the West Valley side, I think it's not working. San Jose had a different problem. San Jose was a large city. It had a lot of say in Santa Clara County level. Most of the supervisors used to come from there. And then, it always was a town without much of employment, and they needed more employment. So they can build. I mean, they have a lot of land, but on the West Valley side, we have a lot of constraints. So, and the other thing is we don't have the kind of transit that, that is serving the San Jose side of things. So that's, I mean, I will stop here. I think other people have, can contribute much more to you than us, than me.
Yeah. No, you make some very good points. Again, each jurisdiction, each city has its own particular needs and challenges around housing, transportation, infrastructure, and so forth. I think those need to be taken into more account as this RENA plan development is done. When I know we're running a little short on time here, I know there's more questions coming in.
And we had a question,
Yes.
even though I mentioned it in your introduction. What is your position on women's right to choose?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I believe in reproductive rights. A woman's right to choose is her personal thing. Personal bodily autonomy is very important to me. And that we've had a system that has worked where you were able to get an abortion if you felt you needed to get one. I think that should continue the way it is. I do think that the leak was an atrocious thing to have happen. We should really kind of wait and see what the final judgment is, but I believe in a woman's right to choose. Yeah, personal choice.
Great. And there was also a question about how difficult it is for those of us who live out in the wildland urban interface to get home fire insurance now. I have a friend in Portola Valley whose fire insurance went from $12,000 a year to $50,000 a year, but at least she got it. Some people are not able to find coverage right now. Do you have you thought about this issue yet? And do you have any suggestions as to how our insurance commissioner can help residents in these fire danger zones? And it's particularly concerning because of the RENA numbers in SB 9, where they're asking us to increase density.
Right. Yeah. Fire insurance, it's much like the problem we've had with earthquake insurance, where there's such a risk, we may need to put in like a base level insurance that the state helps provide because of the additional challenges as we move forward through climate change with fire risk, to make it affordable, and so that you're not basically priced out of being able to own a home. That's kind of the way I see going. Also, I know that I don't know a lot about the insurance here in the state, but I think in order to play in the insurance market, the more lucrative insurance market, I think insurers should need to provide a fire insurance component along with it. Let's say automobile insurance and those kinds of things. That helps balance out the cost, still being able to provide a reasonable level of affordable insurance for areas like Woodside, like Portola Valley, where there clearly is going to be higher risk as things continue to dry out with climate change.
I had another question come in for you.
Thank you.
It's regarding housing. And it reads, our housing problems in the Bay Area have been caused by jobs housing imbalances. How do you foresee helping alleviate the stresses that come when municipalities keep allowing huge development for commercial space and business with no housing requirements?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. We can't just allow for a large build of a commercial complex with lots of employees without accounting for the housing. And if the housing isn't there, we shouldn't be allowing that build to happen. It continues the imbalance, and it's not smart policy on the corporation side, because if they can't attract employees because housing is so unavailable and so expensive, it's counterproductive for them to establish here. That's why, I'd like to see this more distributed working environment continue. I think Airbnb has kind of been a model for that, of distributed employees entirely, which I think is a great idea. And hopefully, here in Mountain View, Google is a huge employer. They will continue to distribute their workforce beyond the Bay Area, and not so much continued growth here in the Bay Area. So that's what I'd like to see. Accounting for the housing when an approval is given to a new commercial project.
Yeah. There was also a question, I don't think we've covered it all, are you familiar with Prop 19, whereby homeowners can pass on their home to a child or grandchild, and for the beneficiaries, they get to keep the tax base. And are you in favor of that? Please explain your position.
Okay, I don't think I'm familiar with Prop 19. So basically, they keep the original tax base as it's inherited on to a child or grandchild. Is that my understanding of the basis of Prop 19, as opposed to it being reset and taxed?
Correct. Reassess.
Yeah. I'll have to look into that. My gut reaction is that's a good approach. I can see the appeal of the tax dollars by being reassessed, but then it may ultimately need to be sold because they can't afford to take the capital gain. If I understand the policy, I'm kind of guessing here based on this because I'm not familiar with Prop 19, but I will look into that.
Yeah, one detail, Tim, is that the children typically that inherit it would have to actually live in the house. So that was a little detail that they worked out to make sure that, it wasn't just like flip it and that sort of thing. But anyway, yeah, more research makes sense.
In order not to have that tax implication, is that my?
Right.
Sounds reasonable to me. Yeah.
Great. And I have a question for you too. I don't see any new ones, but please raise your hand. If I've missed you, I'll ask my question now. I think I know the answer to it, Tim, but I'd like to ask if you are someone who, unlike many of our legislators, will do your homework.
Oh.
We have now elected officials who give vague responses to any given questions. And the answer might be informed by nothing more than a concern about the party's stance or not wanting to offend a donor. And so the best we can do is hope that they'll stay neutral on an issue, but we really need leadership. So if you can speak to that a little bit. Sure.
As you may have gathered, there's a lot to learn here. And that's why I appreciate these questions, especially about things that I may not have covered, and I will do my homework. I will try to find out as much as I can about an issue, and we'll definitely want to hear from both sides, especially from my constituents, if they have an opinion on something, and do what is going to be in the best interest both of my district as well as for the state as a whole. But clearly my allegiance is going to be to my district in terms of what their concerns are.
Oh, that's great, because that actually leads me to the last question that I have here, which came in about the Bay Delta plan. And this is something that might be challenging for you as a Republican, because historically the Republican Party has supported the farmers in the Central Valley need for water. And so there's a lot of water diversion from rivers like the Tuolumne River that goes to irrigating high water crops in our desert state. And in fact, your constituents, Tim, would be among the people who would prefer to see that water come all the way out to our coast. We have recreational and commercial, the nexus of economic development and environmental protection is out here, recreation and the commercial, commercial fishing industry. So our needs are very different than what the farmers in the Central Valley are asking for. And this is a very challenging, difficult problem.
Yeah, I know that the fisheries have suffered, the salmon runs have suffered. We've had some really bad drought years, and the amount of unimpaired flow has been almost, nothing on certain years. One of the things I want to continue to see is again, we've allocated funds for more water storage, which could be used for servicing agriculture. I would like to see fewer crops that can't be allowed to go fallow. So if you think of trees and vines, which has been a hot button issue, you think of the almond farmers and so forth, because we're going to have drought years. We're going to be short of water. We're not going to be able to pump. And I am a big fan of our environment here in the state. That's what makes it so great. That's what makes California such a wonderful state. We need to continue to be able to support the fisheries, the ecosystems all up and down the state with water flow, while supporting again our local urban areas, and then the agricultural areas. But agriculture does take, I think, a bulk of the water in the state. I think it's around 50%. Actually, it's 50% environmental, about 40% agricultural. But we need to be that's where we need to, I think, hit the buffer. There's not a lot, certainly in the urban areas, we need to do everything to conserve, reduce our water consumption for a variety of things, whether it be in the household. And we also need to start looking at more gray water usage, recycling the water that we use here in the urban areas. So that's kind of my position. I'm probably not the typical conservative. I certainly understand the needs of agriculture, but I think we need to have smart agriculture. I have a very elaborate drip system here, and I think that needs to be implemented all throughout agriculture within the state. Really tight water controls to definitely preserve as much water as possible for urban areas and for our ecosystems throughout the state.
We've just had a comment that the largest carbon cost in California is pumping water. I did not know that. That's
wow.
Interesting. That's something worth looking into.
Okay.
All right.
So I know we're at the top of the hour, and I do have actually another call I was going to jump onto. I appreciate you listening. I actually didn't get to hear from very many of you, but I hope you can go to my website and find out more. Feel free to message me at timdec4assembly@gmail.com, and we can continue the dialogue if you've got other questions.